So we have a pretty interesting story from a couple of days ago that not a lot of people are talking about. Harvard professor says all hell broke loose when his study found no racial bias in police shootings. Now, this is the story of Roland Fryer. A lot of you guys know this story. He's a Harvard professor. He's a black Harvard professor who published this study. And basically, for the first time ever, from what I understand, he admitted in this report, this recent report from a couple of days ago, that basically all of his colleagues told him not to publish this paper because it would ruin his career. Now, this is the trust the science crowd. I just want to remind you of this. These are the people that say trust the science, right? Science is real. In this house, we believe Black Lives Matter. We believe no human is illegal. We believe love is love. And we believe science is real. This is that crowd who are telling him to not publish this paper because it's going to ruin his career. So he decided to anyway, and he had to have a security team follow him around for years because he decided to publish this study. Now, before he started to do his research into this for this study, for this paper that was going to be published, he thought that it was going to show without a shadow of a doubt that there was racial bias against black people in these police encounters. But what he found was completely the opposite. Now, this story is similar to a couple of other stories we've been over on the show. There was a Thomson Reuters data scientist that was fired for finding the same thing during the whole Black Lives Matter, the Summer of Love 2020, which was the year of 2020 was like the biggest and most intricate psychological operation against the American people ever. I mean, think about it. I was just talking about this on a show I was on the other day. You had George Floyd, right? The Summer of Love, Black Lives Matter. You had the lockdowns. You had COVID-19. You had the election. Then you had that followed up with January 6th, and, which is still going on, still ongoing. It was the biggest experiment, the biggest psychological operation on the population, on a population in human history, And we're going to touch on that a little bit here today because, this is the election year. This is 2024. We are in 2024. We are in an election year, and a lot of people are anticipating something like this, something happening this year. So we'll talk about that as well. Before we get into the story, before we get into other stories, we have a bunch of other stuff we want to go through here today too. I just wanted to thank this video sponsor. This video has been kindly sponsored by me, by us, by our own show. A lot of the sponsors have caved on us. A lot of the sponsors have been attacked by the media and have caved on us. And so the show is basically 100% supported by the viewers. And we are losing subscribers on Subscribestar, not gaining. So if we can get you guys over to subscribestar.com/Vincent-James, subscribe over there for $2 a month, $5 a month. You're going to get access to exclusive content, and we're going to make sure that the show goes on. Because at this point, it's teetering. At this point, to be honest, it's teetering. And so we need your support for the show to continue. So make sure to check out the links in the description below. There's a bunch of ways you can support the show. Subscribestar is just one of them. We've got Bitcoin. We've got the P.O. Box. There's all sorts of ways you can support the show, so make sure to check it out. All right, so let's get to this article here. And this is about this economist, Roland Fryer. Harvard professor says all hell broke loose when his study found no racial bias in police shootings. So it says here a Harvard professor said that all hell broke loose, and he was forced to go out in public with armed security after he published a study that found no evidence of racial bias in police shootings. When Fryer claimed the data showed no racial differences in officer-involved shootings, he said all hell broke loose and his life was upended. Fryer received the first of many complaints and threats 4 minutes after publication. Quote, "You're full of shit," the sender said. Fryer said people quickly lost their minds, and some of his colleagues refused to believe the results after months of asking him not to print the data. Trust the science, though, right? I had colleagues take me to the side and say, don't publish this. You'll ruin your career. Now just think of this. When you're thinking about all of the reclassifications in the DSM, for instance, on homosexuality, transgenderism, now we have child gender dysphoria and so forth. Think of the study that was deleted, that was published and deleted on, I can't remember which university this was. This was a few years ago, on child gender dysphoria or gender dysphoria in general. Like this, they say trust the science because they have complete control over the science, right? They have complete control over the science and over the institutions that control the information that they put out there. And it's all information. It's not just scientific information. It's It's information coming from social media. It's information coming from the media, from the news media, from TV, from commercials, from movies, and so forth. Right? They say trust the science because they have they have academia completely locked down. Right? And so, when things like this happen, when people like this, you look at George J. Borjas, who wanted to publish his book called We Wanted Workers, and he went through a similar experience when it came to publishing his studies on the effects of mass migration into the United States, specifically illegal immigration. He went through a similar experience. And you have a couple of other stories that we're going to get to here as well. Fryer admitted that he anticipated the results of the study would be different and would confirm suspicions of racial bias against minorities. When the results found no bias, Fryer hired 8 new assistants and redid the study. The data came back the same. After the report was published, Fryer lived under police protection for over a month. He had a 7-day-old daughter at the time and went shopping for diapers with security. He had to go shopping for diapers with a security team. I was going to the grocery store to get diapers with the armed guard. It was crazy. It was really, truly crazy, he said. At the time, then Harvard Dean Claudine Gay claimed Fryer's research and conduct with other employees exhibited a pattern of behavior that failed to meet expectations within the community. Right? And so, when, there's of course, we've talked about this before in the universities, all these attacks against white people and stuff like this. Like, this doesn't lead to the ouster of someone like Claudine Gay, right? This doesn't lead to the ouster of the heads, the leaders of these Ivy League universities. What does, though, is if you are anti-Semitic in any way, then they're going to be able to get congressional hearings within a matter of days, and then they're going to be able to replace the presidents of Ivy League universities, of all the 3 that they care about, the 3 of 5 that they care about. They're going to replace the presidents of these Ivy League universities within a matter of weeks, and that's exactly what they were able to do. Now, on this study, let me just fix this camera for a moment here. It's not completely straight. There we go. It's bothering me. That was bothering me so much. Okay, well, actually, that's worse. There we go. All right. Sorry, that was like bugging me the whole time I was talking. So when you look at studies like this, and this is something I've been talking about on the show for years, you have to take into consideration the likelihood that someone's going to have a police encounter, right? You have to enter that into the equation to determine whether or not there is bias, right? Because And see, this is where it gets tricky. This is where it gets a little touchy. This is the reason why they don't want stuff like this published. This is the reason why they don't want the majority of the population to know things like this. It's because to get to that correct conclusion, you are going to have to disaggregate. Well, basically, you're just going to have to put it simply, you're going to have to talk about which groups of people are more likely to commit crime. If a certain group of people is more likely to commit crime, then therefore they're more likely to have a police encounter. Then therefore you're going to have to add that into the equation to determine whether or not there's racial bias at the end of the day. And that is the part that they don't want any part of. That is the part that they don't want people to know. And I think it goes without saying, which groups of people are more likely to commit crime. And, that's just the truth. Call me what you want to call me. That's just the truth. And this story is very similar to this other story we've talked about on the show. This happened back about 2 years ago. Almost exactly 2 years ago. White Thompson, Reuters data scientist, says he was fired from his $350,000 role by woke bullies for sharing data showing cops kill more unarmed white people than black people. Now, this is not necessarily what his data showed. What his data show, I guess, is technically plural data. What he talked about was, again, what I just said, controlling for police encounters, controlling for the likelihood that you're going to have a police encounter based on crime rates broken down by certain demographics of people, certain racial groups, right? Because, of course, cops kill more unarmed white people. Even the Black Lives Matter liberal crowd admits this, right? When pressed. Of course, cops kill more white people than they do black people because there's white people make up 50 to 60% of the entire American population, whereas black people make up around 15% of the population. So, of course, you're going to have a higher number of white people that are killed by police. Now, what they say is that you have to break this down per capita. You have to say, well, hold on a second. Because white people are a bigger portion of the population, you have to do this per capita, or you have to do this per 100,000 people, and then you're going to see that black people are killed by police at a much higher rate per 100,000 people than white people are. So when it comes to that, they're all in favor of per capita. But when it comes to crime rates, not so much, right? Because again, there's another step to that. Yeah, there's another step to that. You have to, like I said twice already, you have to take into consideration the likelihood that you're going to have a police encounter based on the crime rates broken down by certain racial groups. And when you put that into your scientific equation, you're going to find that there is no racial bias. In fact, white people are more likely to be killed by police per 100,000 when you take crime rates into consideration. And this is what this data scientist, this Reuters data scientist, pointed out, because people were going crazy back during this psychological operation of 2020, and he was like, we need to tell the truth here, because the cities are burning right now, and he was fired for even suggesting that we should tell the truth. Additionally, there was another story. This top economist, Paul Krugman, who's on, he's got this master class. You see these ads on YouTube. Well, he teamed up with a bunch of other professors to seek a top economist removal from an influential job for criticizing Black Lives Matter, for basically saying kind of similar things to what we're saying here on the show. This effort was headed up by Paul Krugman, Wolfers, and Iberman. I'll let you guys pattern notice yourself here. So here's the tweet from Paul Krugman from back in June of 2020. He says, he talks about Justin Wolfer, editor of the Journal of Political Economy, a powerful gatekeeper in the profession, and yet another privileged white man who evidently can't control his urge to belittle the concerns of the less fortunate. And this guy was talking about this guy, Harold Uhlig, who was the professor or economist or whatever that was trying to tell the truth, that was trying to tell the American people the truth. So this is one of the guys who had behind this, and he says, I have no confidence in this guy, and he's a racist, and blah, 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 blah. You can find the thread. This is up on Twitter. It's at Justin Wolfers, and Paul Krugman is at Paul Krugman on Twitter. So that is, again, that is the trust the science crowd. So think about this in the context of anything that has happened over the past decade, whether it comes to COVID, whether it comes to climate change, whether it comes to crime and race and crime and economic outcome broken down by racial groups, and academic outcome broken down by racial groups, academic attainment broken down by racial groups. And the only excuse that they use, the only reasoning that they give us, is that the reason for the disparities between these groups and all those different categories is because of racism, right? But when you actually dig into it, it's actually not. It's actually not. And you're not going to hear that from the trust the science crowd. You're not going to hear that from the media. You're not going to see this in TV or on TV shows or in movies or even on social media, for the most part, for that matter, because once again, they have a complete lockdown over every single institution in America, every single global institution, and the means of which there's an information flow, right? Where we get our information from, I guess, is a better way to put it. They have complete control over that. Another example of the trust the science crowd is this dude I quote tweeted earlier. We're going to get to that here in a moment. I just want to remind you guys, once again, this video is sponsored by you. It's sponsored by you. It's sponsored by me. The show needs your support. The show is basically 100% viewer funded. Sponsors keep getting attacked by the media. They keep getting cold feet, and so we need your support in order for the show to survive. One of the ways you can support the show is through preparewithvincent.com. Preparewithvincent.com. Get a 25-year shelf life dry food supply kit. We've got 4-week supplies. We've got 3-month supplies. We get a big part of every single order, so this helps the show tremendously. And of course, you want to have it, not need it, rather than need it, not have it, right? So it's a good way to stock up on food. I know there are cheaper options out there, but check it out. You're helping a small show. You're helping a small business, Daily Veracity, while you're at it. And also, this stuff tastes way better than any of the other cheap crap that's out there. I've eaten this stuff myself. Every single flavor that they offer, I've eaten myself. And the Costco brands and all the other cheap brands out there, they taste like absolute hell. So make sure to check it out. It's Prepare with Vincent, not Vince. Vincent, some Asian guy that runs the Prepare with Vince site. And who knows what you're going to get in that food? Am I right? Preparewithvincent.com. Make sure to check it out. Links are in the description below. All right, so let's get on to this guy I quote tweeted here. This is another one of the Trust the Science crowd. This guy was Will Stancil, right? This guy is this big metro policy researcher. He's a super academic, right? This, like, I don't even know, young millennial Gen Z dude. I do metro policy research focused on fair housing, school integration, and demography. Proud member of Do Something Twitter. Right, so here's what he tweets out. He says, America is not in rapid decline. America is richer and safer than ever before. Now, this is the part that I have a big issue with, because this is what we hear from a lot of liberals day in and day out. America is safer than ever before. But check this out. All we have to do is a quick little dig into the crime rates broken down per 100,000 people, of course, because, populations have changed over time, so we have to get a per capita rate. We have to get a per 100,000 rate. Actually, is what this information gives us. We have to look at the crime back in 1960, and we have to compare that to the crime today. So let's go back to that tweet here, and we have the breakdown here. Violent crime per 100,000 in 1950, actually it's 1960, but it's about the same. 160.9 violent crime today, 379. So that's about 3 times higher today. Forcible rape per 100K, 1960 versus today, 9.6 to 42.6. Now, I know this number can be, it's kind of like, what does that exactly mean? Aggravated assault per 100K back then, 86.1. Aggravated assault today, 250.2. Now, here's the kicker, right? Because every one of these people always shows the, and we say here, what more do you want from someone with the fantasy world bumper sticker ideology, right? That's what we call their ideology, a bumper sticker ideology. Diversity is a strength. Black lives matter. No human is illegal. Pro-choice. Love is love. They always either use graphs that start in the 1990s, which was the highest point ever for crime, and or only include murder, which, as we know, is extremely misleading. And the reason why it's extremely misleading is because without the medical advances over the past 10 years, murder would be at like 10 per 100,000. It would actually be higher than it was at the height of the crime surge in the 1990s. Here's a scientific paper that, and this is something I said was probably the case for years. I just didn't know that there were actually scientific studies that have been done on this. This one here says medical advances mask epidemic of violence by cutting the murder rate. Murder rates would be up to 5 times higher than they are, but for medical developments over the past 40 years. 5 times higher. Without this technology, we estimate that there would be no less than 50,000 and as many as 115,000 homicides annually instead of 15,000 to 20,000. So the highest was 20,000, right? This is the highest estimate for current modern day America. They're saying it would be no less than 50,000 without these medical advances. So there's a lot of masking going on here. There's a lot of hidden information, of course, that they don't want you to know. In fact, the FBI has started to hide a lot of the crime data when it comes to crime broken down by race, whereas before, there's a lot of stuff that was published. There was a lot of stuff that was published and open. And until people like us, until shows like mine started to point a lot of these things out, which now it's basically become general knowledge. The whole 1350 meme, if you know about that meme, is, you see this in like YouTube shorts now that kids are watching. Like gamers are saying 1350, when really it's, when really it's a lot worse than 1350, but we don't have to get into that today. You don't see many shootings in Europe where the guns are banned. So this is something we hear from liberals all the time, too, which is that if we banned guns, crime would go down because look at Europe, look at Germany, look at Sweden, look at Switzerland, look at their crime, or look at their homicide rates by gun. They're virtually non-existent. They're like at 1 point something per 100,000 or 2 point something per one. Their homicide rate is like 2 per 100,000. Well, here's the thing. Trust the science crowd. If we had a similar population. Maybe you can compare us to, Sweden and Switzerland. And this is why they never want you to compare America to like Guadalajara, Mexico, or like one of these places in South and Central America. They say because they're an undeveloped country, you can only compare America to developed countries. This is what we hear all the time. But when you look into it, the reality is that America is actually more comparable, especially nowadays, to an undeveloped third world nation than it is to Sweden. Because guess what? Sweden doesn't have the populations that are most likely to commit the homicide rate here, that are most likely to commit homicide here. Sweden doesn't have the demographics of people, to put it lightly, that is most likely to commit gun crime here. Because when you remove those specific demographics from the population, I'm not saying to do this, but I'm just saying hypothetically, if you remove that group of people or those groups of people from the numbers, our homicide rate would be on par with many European countries. Our gun homicide rate would be on par with many European countries. So we can see here, so we say you don't see many shootings in Europe where guns are banned, in quotes. Gee, I wonder why. You've got Missouri, white-black difference is 56.65. This is per 100,000 people per year by race and state. So I think you guys get this chart, which was surprisingly published by CNN. I don't know when. I don't know what year. Speaking of crime, when have you ever heard of Girl Scouts being robbed? Because apparently a group of Girl Scouts selling their Girl Scout cookies outside of Walmart in Texas. This would never happen in North Idaho, where I live, by the way. And again, the controversial demographic conversation has to be had. I mean, it just has to be had, because it will disprove a lot of the narratives out there where, again, the reason is racism. The reason is racism. The reason is racism. If this conversation were to be had, if information like what Roland Fryer and the Reuters data scientist and so forth were trying to publish was mainstream knowledge, a lot of these like racial conversations would go away. People would be like, okay, there's an issue here. We have to talk about this truthfully in order to solve this problem. You can't solve a problem without identifying it accurately, right? You're just dancing around it at that point. But Texas Girl Scout troop robbed while selling cookies in front of Walmart. Now, the New York Post doesn't, and they're like asking for help to like identify the person, but they don't even provide a picture of the person. Here's the picture of the person from the Fort Worth Police Department's Twitter account. Okay, you understand how they're doing this now? They're even talking about deleting mugshots because mugshots are now racist, because the mugshots of criminals in this country are mostly mugshots of black people. So now they're talking about deleting mugshots. In Cook County, Illinois, they deleted the gangs database. They said it was inaccurate information. This is the reason why they did it. But if you look into the activists that were behind the push to delete the gangs database in Cook County, Illinois, they said it was a racist database because it showed mostly black and Hispanic people. Who are mostly in gangs? Like, who are mostly in gangs? And would those gangs exist if it weren't for the demographic change this country has experienced? That's a question for you to ponder. It's a question for you to ponder, for sure. Remember the article I've brought up on this show quite a bit? New Hampshire, 94% white. How do we diversify a whole state? 10 people facing charges in connection with double shooting at New Hampshire restaurant. Well, I guess you don't need a crystal ball. You don't need a crystal ball to see if diversity is truly a strength, like our friends on the liberal side with their bumper sticker utopian world ideology. Meanwhile, we have migrants attacking police at a migrant holding center in New York. question. Like, the reason why they're even here in holding centers is because Joe Biden freaking allows them to come here by the millions and allows them to stay here by the millions. This whole border deal that they tried to like pass is nothing short of just more taxpayer money for foreign countries. It does nothing to stop. If they wanted to stop it, they could very easily stop it. They didn't have to remove all of these different Trump-era policies that were helping to mitigate the crisis at the border. And this is shown in the numbers, by the way. If you compare today to 2016, 17, 18, and 19. Actually, if you just look at the numbers right as Biden gets into office in 2021, it's like the bar graph is like just shoot straight up. But the thing is, though, is that, what did this person do that they're trying to arrest? We've all heard the stories about what occurs in migrant holding centers, especially when children are in the same migrant center. The question is, what did this person do? So that's what we have on the whole race and crime topic. It's definitely an important discussion, so make sure to share this video with family and friends. I think it'll change a lot of people's minds. Make sure to retweet this if you're watching on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe on Rumble if you're not subscribed. It's Daily Veracity with Vincent James on Rumble. Don't go to the smaller channel. Go to the bigger channel. I own both. Don't know why that happened. But it's Daily Veracity with Vincent James. Make sure to sub on Rumble. And make sure to please support the show. The show needs your support more than ever before. All the links to how you can support the show are in the description below. Since we've been banned from every mainstream platform that exists, we need your support for the show to survive. You can support by subscribing to my Subscribestar for $5 a month to get access to exclusive content and more at other tiers. You can also support by using cryptocurrency, our P.O. Box, and as always, going to preparewithvincent.com or waterwithvincent.com to get your 25-year shelf life dry food supply or water filter systems. Check out dailyveracity.com/support to find all the links. It helps the show tremendously.